Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Akumakon 2015. I'll be your host, Tom Garavan, and joining me today is the amazing Patrick Seitz.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Now, Patrick is joining us all the way from the USA today. He is a voice actor, he's an ADR director, and you may have heard him in some massive things such as Fairy Tale, Attack on Titan, Keith Shadis, who is... for some reason he didn't like Sweet Potato.
No, he had a thing with the potatoes.
Yeah, but now you're here in Ireland, so you've kind of...
I have come to love the potatoes. I love potatoes in real life, so it was not tough coming around.
You're not making people run laps just for liking them now.
Only if they keep them from me.
But you've also been in some huge games. You recently did... Well, you've been doing the voice for Garrosh Hellscream from World of Warcraft. That has got to be amazing. And also, a personal favourite, Mondo Zappa from Killer is Dead.
Indeed.
Absolutely love that. But one of your babies has to be Monster.
Yes. Oh, Monster is one of those shows that not a lot of people got to see the dub. Not a lot of people got to see the Japanese. I think probably the most easily accessible form of it was the manga. But that is one of those, excuse me, that is one of those properties I tell people, read it, watch it. I don't care how you experience it, just experience it. It is too good to miss out on. So see it, please. And I think actually, last time I checked, it did get an actual disc release in Australia by a company called Siren Media. So if you don't mind having to venture out into the world to get it and order it and have a region-free DVD player, you actually can avail yourself of the dub, which is gratifying to me.
How have you been? How have you found Akumakon so far?
It's been good. It's. I'm glad definitely that I came into town ahead of the convention to do my sightseeing and acclimate to the time change before. I've done it a couple times where I leave the country and go to a convention straight away, and it's been kind of rough because in the middle of a panel I'm just thinking to myself, it feels like it's 2 a.m. right now because where I'm from it's 2 a.m. right now. No, it's been great. People have been really gracious and really friendly, and I mean, there's a spectrum sometimes with how friendly people are, or how in your face, or people can get a little overbearing. It hasn't been the case here at all, which is really nice. It's been a good experience. Yesterday I had a little bit of event action here, and then I just came right now for my Q&A panel. So far the turnout's been pretty good, which I'm glad about. I'd hate if they went to all the trouble of bringing me out and then nobody showed up. But it's been good so far.
That was your first time with like an Irish audience. How was that?
It was good. It in my mind I'm thinking to myself, have I done any shows where I did an Irish accent? Are they gonna hate me? Have I set myself up for failure here? What have I done? No, I think with me it's always interesting. Just going around the country in the U.S. and then leaving the country, it's amazing just the impact and the spread that some of these titles have. I mean, the fact that people in L.A. they dig fairy tale. You go to Texas, they dig fairy tale. Excuse me. You go to Alabama, they dig fairy tale. You go to England, they dig fairy tale. You come to Ireland, they dig fairy tale. I mean, just using that one as an example, it's amazing that you've got this niche product of Japanese animation dubbed into foreign languages, but that so many people would enjoy it. It's kind of mind-blowing.
So you've actually played a number of huge parts, like I mentioned. How did that all start?
That started, it really kind of came together serendipitously. My mom taught at the high school that I ended up attending, and every year, instead of doing a lot of little plays or a lot of little shows, the theater kids would do one big musical. They'd rent an auditorium, they'd get the sets, they'd get an orchestra, they would just go all out. And the lady that ran the whole thing had studied with, I'm forgetting his name now, but she was the real deal. And she said, I don't care if you're high schoolers, I don't care if you've never done a show before, we're going to do a show and it's going to be awesome and you're going to be professional. So I grew up watching these yearly musicals because they would give all the teachers tickets. And so she would bring me. So from a very young age, watching like South Pacific, The King and I, Unsinkable Molly Brown, Oklahoma, all the old, Fiddler on the Roof, the old standards. And then when I started going to that high school, like 14, 15 years old, I tried out for the musical. Nothing I really thought about. There was no real moment of introspection. I just thought, well, I'm here. I guess I'll try out for the shows because I like them. Like, I didn't have any grand master plan. Got into the show because theater, they always need guys. That's just, the way it always is. And really enjoyed it. And sort of got the acting bug. Started taking lessons, doing musicals, doing plays. Didn't major in theater in college, but did plays with the theater department. And then I thought to myself, hey, I only live an hour outside of Los Angeles. I'm going to move to LA and be an actor. Just as easy as that. Well, it wasn't. It was stupid to think that. I was naive. I was 21 and didn't know anything. And not saying 21s don't know anything. This particular 21-year-old didn't know anything. I never lived on my own, didn't know how the world worked, and I was in this, horrible town doing this impossible thing. And it really didn't pan out for me because I didn't know what I was doing. But the voiceover part, before I'd left, the lady that did these musicals each year said, you've got an interesting voice. You should think of doing voiceover on the side. Because I've basically sounded like this since puberty onward, which, now isn't so weird because I'm this big sort of chubby, schlubby dude, whatever. But, back when I'm 18, I'm 150 pounds soaking wet and I look like a scarecrow. I'm like, hey guys, what's up? Freak people out. So I took a bunch of lessons, got a demo together, and I had the good fortune to get in with a dubbing company on what was only their second or third project. So I was new to dubbing. I'd never done before. I didn't know what anime was. But they were new too. The problem for people trying to come into this is that, yeah, you can make a demo, you can take the classes, you can approach the companies, but they already have a bunch of people. They already have their Johnny Young Bosch. They already have, Patrick Seitz if they use me. It's tough convincing them to take a chance on someone new when they've got these people that are known quantities. But this company that I got in with back in the day, they were new too. They didn't have a preset stable of talent. So they're willing to, take a chance and, excuse me, sort of cultivate somebody. So it was really a lot of factors coming together at just the right time. I was new, they were new. The industry was such that you could take a chance. I'd had the theater training. I was male and had a low voice and was young, and that wasn't something they were hearing a lot of. I mean, if you watch anime, a lot of it is like the squeaky, young voiced female. You've got the heroic, young sounding male lead. But there really wasn't a lot of young, male, low voices. So I think when they heard me, I think they said we should put this guy in our menagerie, so to speak.
Like you said, with your voice, you normally are cast as like villains sometimes, or like really enigmatic heroes. Would you say that there are any roles you haven't that you'd like to play, or any voices we haven't heard yet?
I think it's weird, when I started doing this in LA, they would use me for serious and low villains, or like you said, sort of enigmatic heroes. And then some friends of mine in Texas gave me a shot and used me for stuff like Oron High School Host Club as Nekozawa, where he was kind of younger and kind of funny and kind of a little which wasn't something I was doing in LA. I mean, a lot of us can do more than we are used to do, but it's like opera insofar as that there are vocal types. And okay, are you a bass baritone? We're going to use you as a bass baritone. Not to say that you don't have some tenor range, but we could get a tenor. If you live in bass baritone land, that's what we're going to use you for. So that was sort of the progression for me of like, oh, he can do funny, he can be funny, he can be zany. We can use him for that too. And then eventually that paid off with stuff like Frankie in One Piece. As far as characters I'd like to do, I mean, I can go a little younger than I'm usually used for and go a little higher. I did Pinion in Gargantua semi-recently, and that was pretty high for me. I remember when we first started recording, I did a line, and the Japanese kind of sounded like default me. So I read the line, and the director said, go a little higher. I said, go a little higher. So I kept going higher until he stopped me, and I thought, man, I hope this is working, because I feel like I'm just really sort of out of my comfort zone. But then it came out, and people didn't burn down the castle, so I guess it worked. I feel lucky. I like being the villain. I like being the character actor guy, because if you think about it, this gets a little pedantic and stupid, but if you think about it, if the protagonist of something is defined by the person that moves the story forward, if that is the actual definition of the protagonist, that's usually the villain, because the villain is the one off to poison the water supply, blow up the spaceship, do whatever they're doing, and then the hero is the one stepping in to sort of be reactive and prevent them from doing what they're doing. You know what I mean? The villain is proactive, and the hero, who's one or two steps behind them until the end when they finally win and yay, they save the day, is just reacting to whatever the villain is doing. So villains are usually, I don't want to say all the time, but a lot of the times they're more interesting because whatever reason they're doing what they're doing needs to be established and explored, where sometimes the hero isn't fleshed out as fully. The hero is just presented as the person who's going to stop the villain, and you don't really know what else they're about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like your role in Fairy Tale.
I love Loxus. He's interesting because he's conflicted. You know, even if he were just a creep all the time, that would be fine. That would be fun. That'd be great. But he wants to be a part of things. He's just too much of a jerk to be able to ask. He's too proud. He's too defensive. And then, you know, later on things sort of unfold such that he gets to be part of things more. But early on, when you're first meeting him, he's got such a chip on his shoulder, and he's got such daddy and grandpa issues. I like him a lot. He's fun. I will say that the fighting festival arc of Fairy Tale, when he takes over the festival, turns the girls into statues, and makes Fairy Tale all fight each other, that was probably the most torn up any anime has ever done for me. I remember I did that, and then I came home and did one of the Blaze Blue games, and I was like, man, I tore myself up doing Loxus, because there were times, especially later in that process where he was fighting Natsu, where Natsu would be talking, you know, be laying down some exposition before the fight about how things work, and Loxus would just be in the background powering up over and over again. He's not even fighting yet, but he's in the back, like, you know, doing his Kamehameha routine. It just tore me to pieces, because when I go down to Texas to record the Funimation stuff, I'll do full days. In LA, you'll do, you know, 2, 3, 4 hours, and you'll call it a day. When I'm down in Texas, got to get this stuff done and get back home. So you'll do a full, you know, 8, 10, 12, if need be, hour day. And that can get, if you're doing something like Fairy Tale and you're fighting a lot, that can add up.
It's like you took, for me, the voice just went that step further when you were doing the World of Warcraft things. Like Garrosh Hellscream has such a guttural kind of sound. What was it like stepping that up even further?
That, I tell you, Garrosh is one of those where, when I started voicing him, I had no idea where it was going to go. I mean, I had no idea how prominently he'd be featured or how rich of a character arc they would give him. It was just, and I don't even, again, it's one of those where people say, how did you find that voice? How did you come up with that voice? And I wish I had a better answer, because I just remember they told me he was an orc and he was angry, and they showed me the lines, and I opened my mouth and something came out. Like, I don't even remember having a conscious process of putting that voice together. I just thought, what's the most bestial voice that I can do that will still be clear enough for the enunciation of the lines? And that's what came out. And, you know, people that have played the games and sort of followed him through his journey, he starts out mad and big and loud and external, but then you really get, again, more of his backstory and what's motivating him. And, you know, I don't want to get into Spoilerville with the current stuff, but it gets heavy. There were a couple sessions with him where at the end we all just sort of looked at each other like, whew, now we go home. Now we go home and decompress and detox and come back and do it again. I will tell you, Blizzard Entertainment has been like a fairy godmother to me, because a lot of times it's this weird disconnect. Companies will be like, Patrick Seitz, what's a Patrick Seitz? Who's a Patrick Seitz? Maybe he can be like guard F, I guess, in this thing, maybe. And then there's Blizzard, where they just keep letting me be these awesome characters. Like, I really expect them to pull me aside one day and be like, okay, dude, we overdid it. We can't use you again for like 5 years. Nothing against you, just we can't. Because between, you know, Garrosh and then Arthas and the WoW stuff and Artanis and StarCraft, I mean, they've just... I'm not used to that sort of generosity from a company. They've really... I keep thinking, you know, it's like, I got the golden ticket and got to go to the, you know, the chocolate factory, so to speak. Except instead of chocolate, it's Blizzard games. They've just been phenomenally generous to me.
Are you a WoW player?
I was back in the day. An underemployed actor friend of mine, which should have been my first hint, got me into the game, and that was, oh man, this was like 8 or 9 years ago now. It was just after Burning Crusade launched, because I remember, like, literally a week before I started, that came out, so all the vanilla WoW stuff that I was doing as a new player was empty. It was a ghost town, because everyone was off doing, you know, the new content. And from what I've heard from people that I know that play and people I know that work for Blizzard, it is just, between the dailies and the achievements and the pets, and it's a much different game. I think it sounds like the grind for the basic leveling has gotten easier, and if you're masochistic and are really looking for a challenge, you can sort of throw yourself against that wall with the heroics and the raiding and that sort of endgame content. I mean, I was a paladin back when paladins couldn't do anything. And then after I left, like shortly after I stopped playing, then it sounded like they got overpowered as compensation. I was so jealous. I was like, oh, now they can do things. But I'd like to go back. I'd especially with Warlords of Draenor. That's been such a... I mean, they're back over 10 million subscribers now. They picked up another like 1.5 or 2, I think, of people that had left and just gotten burnt out. They came back because this particular expansion spoke to them. I'd like to get back into it. And I wouldn't have time to be good at it, but it would be neat to experience the stuff that I've worked on from the player's point of view. You know, I'd be the bane of every group I was in, I'm sure. We'd wipe 1,000 times. But if I got in with some of my friends who understood, like, look, I'm just going to experience the story. Don't hate me if I suck at being a paladin. So be it. But I do like it. I'm more of a D3 guy myself. I play a lot of the Diablo 3, especially now with the rifts, because you can go in, do a little chunk, and be done. You know what I mean? So if I'm working on a script and I need a break, I can go, okay, one greater rift, and I'm out, back to work. Whereas with WoW, you're like, oh, it's 8 hours later. How did that happen?
Is it strange hearing yourself?
It is. It's weird. It's weird hearing me. It's weird hearing my friends. Because I'll play a game and I'll be like, oh, that's me. Oh, that's so-and-so. Oh, yep, I know them. And it's especially with voiceover, that's not a huge community. I mean, you do it long enough and you're going to be hearing a lot of the usual suspects again and again. So for me, I'm a gamer. I've always been a gamer. I mean, I got into anime when I started working on it and found out how cool it was. But I remember age 3, my dad walking in with the Atari 2600. I remember that. And I don't have many memories of that age. And there's no reason I should remember that because I didn't know, you know, in that moment as a 3-year-old, what impact video games were going to have on my life, you know, personally and professionally. But I remember him walking in with that thing. So working on games is a thrill. And if I can get lost in a game, even when having to contend with the fact that I'm hearing a bunch of familiar voices sort of pulling me out of the fiction of it, then it's a testament to the video game. Because it's very easy for me to be like, oh, yep, same voices, I know those people. So if I can look beyond that, it's rare and I really enjoy it.
Would you say the anime industry has really grown across America and Europe over the last couple of years?
Well, it seems like it has. I mean, I was in it for a couple of years, and then we had the bubble bursting. I don't know if Suncoast was a franchise over here, if you guys had an equivalent. We had a company called Suncoast that carried basically all the anime, and they folded. And when they folded, it was sort of catastrophic for the dubbing companies in the U.S. What had happened for us was Japan caught wind of anime being popular in America, you know, in sort of its niche, and started charging a lot for the licensing fees. Everything was getting dubbed. Licensing fees were too much for it. People were charging too much for it. There was too much stuff coming out at once, and the audience wasn't building. I remember at one point there was a month randomly where I think 40 anime DVDs came out that month. You know, some one-offs, some just the latest release in a long-running series. If you've got 40 DVDs coming out a month at $30 a DVD and 4 episodes per release, that's not sustainable. It wasn't sustainable, and companies went under, and things got kind of lean for a while. But then people bounced back. You know, Viz is still around. Funimation's going strong. I think Sentai, ADV just keeps sort of rolling the dice and putting on a new face and coming back. So the companies that survived that learned to meet the fans halfway. You're not paying $30 for 4 episodes. Now you're paying like $40 for maybe 12 episodes. You get half a season. Maybe you get a DVD that comes with a Blu-ray bundle release. I feel like the companies have sort of reached out to the fan base to say, look, we're all in this together. We need each other to survive. Let's find a good compromise. And I'll tell you, just in the time I've been going to conventions, I feel like they've just sprung up like mushrooms. I mean, there are, any given weekend of the year, I feel like now there are multiple conventions across the U.S. and globally. It's unreal because people have just decided, I'm going to make a convention. I like conventions, I like anime, I'm going to make one. And sometimes they're great and they endure, and sometimes it's a catastrophe and it's a one-year thing. But it really, I think, speaks to the enthusiasm that people have for this stuff.
You're also an ADR director?
Indeed.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
That and the script adapting both came out of the acting. When I first started doing this, I mean, even when the scripts are good, you're writing things to match the lip flap before you know who the actors are going to be. And so the timing is never going to be perfect all the way through a script. Maybe this line fits, maybe this line is a syllable short, maybe that line is 2 syllables too long. So you have a lot of minor, ideally minor edits you're having to do in the booth as you go. And if you do that long enough, as a director, you figure out who the actors are that are good at fixing things on the fly. They sort of, see the matrix, quote unquote, and figure out a good fix. And so those people ideally get sort of, kicked upstairs into the writing position because they see how it works, they're good at it, they can write dialogue that will fit when other people are delivering it. For me, that was the path. I acted, they were like, okay, he's pretty good at fixing stuff. Adapt this one episode and we'll see what happens. Adapt another one, we'll see if that works. And then the same guy was like, direct this one episode. Because it was an anthology project where it didn't have to have the same tone all the way across. He could afford to take a couple episodes and toss them out as test cases at me. And then out of nowhere, pretty early on, because he'd said, oh, maybe if it works out, maybe someday you can adapt and direct a thing, but we'll see what happens. And then kind of out of left field one day in December, I was working on a thing, we were having lunch, and he said, so there's a show called Girls Bravo. It's 24 episodes, or 26, I forget. Would you like to adapt and direct the whole thing? And I was like, yes. Yes, I would. Oh, and I have to start 3 weeks from now. Okay, I'm going to leave lunch right now. I'm literally going to go home and pack and move right now to do this. Because at that point I was living outside of Los Angeles and driving in. But at that point I needed to be there day in, day out. So I think for most of us, thinking of the people that do this, a majority of the people that direct anime, almost all the people that direct anime and do scripts for anime are actors, because you kind of have to be to understand what's happening on the other side of the glass with the actor. With video games, not as much. You'll get directors that don't act themselves sometimes, which is always, it's such a mystery to me, because I know that when I'm directing, what I'm pulling off of is my own experience as an actor to be able to talk to the actor and tell them something that makes sense. So the people that are good directors who aren't actors, I don't know where they're pulling that wisdom from, if not from experience. But there are a couple where I'm like, for not doing this thing that you're telling other people how to do, you are really good at this. It's kind of magical. And a lot of times with directing, it's just getting out of people's way. If you cast a thing well, if you get the right people in the parts, the directing doesn't have to be this arduous, painful process. It's when people are miscast that you really have to sort of drag them about and pull the performance out of them, and it's torturous. But if you get the right people, you're basically carrying coal to Newcastle. I mean, they're already there. You're just giving them little tweaks. And as the director, you've got an idea of the entire script, whereas they just have their little bit in front of them. So you sort of keep them honest and keep them consistent. Yeah, if you get a good cast, it is a much easier process. You just sort of get out of the way. I mean, you don't have to, as a director, I think everyone feels like if they're not working, if they're not doing, then they're not earning their money and they're superfluous. But a lot of times it's just keeping that ball rolling and getting out of the way and not tripping over your own feet, I feel like. I don't know, it's just me babbling about it.
No, makes sense. Have you got anything in the pipeline for 2015?
Oh, man. 2015, I've got nothing I can name specifically. I've got a relatively big game directing project coming up in the later half of the year that I'm looking forward to. I've got a little bit of directing waiting for me when I get back. Not that week, thankfully, although I do have a little bit of directing that week when I get back and a little bit of voice sessions. It's crazy. Whenever you leave town as a voice actor, the minute you are unavailable, you are popular as heck out of nowhere. They want you, and they want you that day, and it has to be that day. So I had a bunch of voice sessions before I left, just because I told the studios that I work for, hey, I'm going to be gone for 10 days, and they all freaked out, like, oh my God, we need to get this and this and this done and that and that. And so there's going to be some of that when I get back, the stuff that they wanted to get, like, right now, but couldn't. A little bit of directing, a little bit of writing. Last year, 2014, I worked a bunch, which is great. I'm not complaining, but I kept saying yes to projects with the thought in mind that, okay, after this project, things will slow down, and I'll get a break, and I'll get to relax and sort of recharge my batteries. And then the next thing would come up, which again, as a freelancer, yes, great, thank God. But that break never happened. So at the end of the year, mid-December, by the time all the studios sort of give up and call it quits for the year, I came down with whatever cold was going around because I'd worked myself into the ground, got sick, stayed sick, didn't have Christmas, didn't catch up with any of my friends, didn't have fun, didn't, veg out to a pile of books and a Netflix queue. It just, so I know, in a sense, this trip, getting to go to Ireland and getting away from work and getting away from home for a while, I feel like this is sort of my chance to reset. Like when I get back home, it'll be 2015. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the very beginning of January, it's, like when you stay up all night, and for everybody else, it's Tuesday. It's Tuesday morning, but for you, it's still Monday. It's the longest Monday ever. It's hour 30 of Monday. It's hour 38 of Monday because you haven't slept. You never got to reset. That's kind of how I felt before I came here. And now, getting to go around, relax, meet you guys, I feel like I'm finally getting to draw the curtain on 2014 and go back and be like, okay, what is this year? That's my long-winded way of saying, yes, 2015 is going to be busy. 2014 was stupidly busy. If 2015 is less busy, that'd be okay. I feel weird saying that as a freelancer, but that would be, because you remember the years. I remember the years where there wasn't enough work. There wasn't. It was lean, and you could have a good month this month, but then you could have nothing next month, and there's no rhyme or reason to it, and you can't plan ahead, and you can't save up and sock it away for a rainy day. So there's that part of me that feels like I will always say yes, even if I'm doing it at the expense of my social life or my health. And I feel like just in the last year or two, I've started being like, hey, dummy, stop that. Don't do that. You're not 20 anymore,
Would you say Ireland has been a good place to come to recharge your batteries?
Oh, yeah. Nice people, beautiful place, good food. Yeah, no, this has been great. And actually, I forgot, my mom reminded me, back in the day, I was going to come to Ireland after college. She was going to send me as like a graduation gift. I thought that would be fun. And then I decided in my youthful stupidity that I was going to go to LA and be an actor. So I didn't take the trip. I just moved out as fast as I could to LA. And then I just sort of put it on the back burner, and then I forgot, and it never happened. And when this trip came up, I decided I'm going to take my mom. What the heck? It's like, I can afford it, and she always supported me in my endeavors, so it'd be a nice sort of thank you. And she reminded me of the fact that I was supposed to go years ago, and then just never got around to it. And I thought, okay, this is sort of, I don't know, something poignant about it, because if left to my own devices, I'll just work and not relax and not take a break and not take trips. So I really depend on out of the country conventions to give me an excuse to take a break, if that makes any sense. Yeah. I wouldn't just go to Ireland on my own for a week. I should, but I wouldn't, because I'm stupid. I'm like, oh, but I'll miss work. Whereas if there's a convention, I'm like, oh, I'll go for the convention, then I'll stay a couple days. And in my mind, it is a reasonable use of time.
Are you going to get up to anything other than the convention while you're here?
I think just looking at the schedule for the next couple of days, I think I did all of my sort of extracurricular stuff on the top end. We got here a day late because the domestic airline in America played a little loose and fast with our connecting time. So we were supposed to have a day dedicated to Dublin, just going to get on the hop-on, hop-off bus and sort of see where we go. That didn't happen. We had a recovery day scheduled. Dublin day turned into the recovery day because we got here a day late. And then we did a 3-day tour starting in Dublin, going down southwest along the coast. Did Blarney Castle, did the Ring of Kerry, were in Cork, did Killarney, and then got in here Thursday evening. That's where the tour ends. And then they all took a train back to Dublin, and I said, well, we're going to stick around and use that ticket in a couple days. And then yesterday just walked around, saw a little bit of Ayr Square, got down to the Spanish Arch, didn't know what the Spanish Arch was about, had to look it up, still took a picture of it and was impressed because I'm like, that's older than my country. That's the thing, as an American, to come to anywhere in Europe and be like, you see that pub? Older than your country. Hey, look at that wall. Older than your country. It's a humbling thing, because I think we have a very skewed sense of history since we are such sort of upstarts in the grand scheme of things. It's that old Eddie Izzard routine where they refurbish a building to look how it looked over 50 years ago. The people are like, 50 years ago? No one was alive. But that's really sort of how we are there. We don't have a sense of history because we all came from somewhere else. And, we didn't leave enough of the indigenous population around to sort of share that's the local sense of history. So it's cool getting to come here. I especially like Blarney Castle. Almost killed myself because I'm a big dude with big feet, and those steps are about the size of a wedge of cheese. It was raining and slick and wet and uneven. Also, I should say, in America, none of your guys' tourist attractions would survive. Because at Blarney Castle, there's some steps. be careful going up. There's a rope you can hold on to. In America, you'd have to sign 8 waivers. They tell, like, okay, elderly and pregnant, don't go up there. You can't take your kids. Would people be leaning back over the side of the thing and holding onto rails to kiss the stone while some random dude holds your legs? No. No, because some stupid person would jump to their death and they'd be sued out of existence. It's nice being somewhere where people assume that you have a brain in your head. You know what I mean? The Burns would be covered in signs in America. Watch your step. Don't step here. We're not liable if you, like, break your ankle. Here they're just like, hey, if it looks too dangerous, don't do it. Think you can handle it? Do it. If you can't, don't. It's refreshing.
Have you tried any Irish cuisine yet?
I have nothing really too outre, so to speak. I'm a big fan of the Irish stew. I've just been all about the Irish stew, and then randomly getting. I think the other day we had noodles. I had like chicken curry. Didn't know what I was getting into. I was like, you know what? I'm having very non-Irish cuisine. I'm going to see what happens, and if it doesn't work out, I have no one but myself to blame. But it's worked out. It's worked out pretty well. I've enjoyed the food. I'll tell you. I feel like I shouldn't say this. England, the food was a little rough. In England, I kept having like food from previous colonies, and that being what I like. What I like, you know what I mean? I'm like, I think the best food I had in England was Indian food. Whereas the best food I had in Ireland was Irish food, but the Asian food was not bad. I didn't know what to expect. I mean, again, in LA, you know, any cuisine I can find from people that were in that country as recently as last week, you don't know what you're going to get when you're out and about in the world. But I got a noodle box yesterday from some place down by the Arch, and that was delicious. And then the hotel had the curry chicken, which was great. No, and the breakfast, again, I mean, I get to the end of the breakfast and I feel like a toad because I'm not a breakfast guy and I've just eaten everything in sight, but it sets me up for the rest of the day. I mean, I'll just chug along all day, have some coffee, some good strong coffee. Good strong coffee.
Have you had black or white pudding yet?
You know, it crossed my path. I did not indulge because I was a little squeamish about the black pudding. I wasn't sure if I was right. I'm like, is it blood? Is it made of blood? And then I found it was blood. I'm like, it's very weird. I'm not a vegetarian, but I'm one of those weird sort of hypocritical carnivores where I don't want to think about where it came from. I don't want it to be an animal. I don't want it to be any quote unquote weird part. You know what I mean? I'm a very sort of contrary, stupid carnivore. And on the other side of the thing, if tomorrow somebody said, hey, for your health or whatever, you have to be vegetarian, I could do that. I'm not someone who would perish without meat, or if I went to a farm and I met some cute baby cow and then they, turned it into burgers in front of me, that might be enough to push me over for like, oh, it's so cute, I never want to eat meat again. So I did not have the pudding. My girlfriend had the pudding, and she's like, no, it's great, it's fine, it tastes good. I'm like, that's more for you. More for you. You can have mine when it comes up. But I think it only really ever got served to me the once. So it's not like I haven't been wasting it because I haven't been taking it. I think on the train, our breakfast came with it, and I was looking at it like, you look like a little falafel thing. And I'm so American. When you say pudding, I think of like dessert pudding. I'm not used to like savory pudding or pudding made of blood. Yeah, I'm very much an American. I'm sorry.
What else are you looking forward to over the weekend for Akumakon?
I've got my first autograph signing coming up a little bit after this. That's going to be interesting. It's always interesting when you go somewhere that you've never been before and that the odds of you coming back are not super high. People come out with some really interesting stuff. They'll bring something that you worked on 10 years ago and haven't really thought of recently. Nobody's brought through your line hardly ever. And you're like, oh, whoa, I did work on that. Oh, look, Paranoia Agent, I'm going to sign that. So it's all the shows and all the games you've worked on sort of come out of the woodwork when it's that now or never, get his signature now, or hold your peace kind of thing. So that'll be definitely interesting to have that come through. And then there's the charity auction. That's always I really commend the convention for not only doing the local charity but doing the Japanese Red Cross. It seems like a really nice mix of like, hey Japan, thank you, building bridges, a home of this thing that we love, and then doing something for the local young folks too. That's a nice even-handed mix of outreach, I think. I don't know, just meeting people. And it's nice at these smaller conventions too. You go to something like, Anime Expo in LA or Otakon in Baltimore in the US, and they're great, but it's like 30,000 people. I mean, I'm not an extrovert by nature. And suddenly when there's people everywhere and rushing around and where do I go and I don't even know how to make the map make sense. Because I tell you, Otakon, the Baltimore Convention Center, was designed by MC Escher. Like, you can see where you have to go. You can see the landing. You can see the staircase that will take you there, but you can't get to it. And maybe by the time you do, you're upside down. Or maybe I just have a really crap sense of direction. It's nice getting to go to these, in the grand scheme of things, smaller conventions. It's more imaginable. It's not crazy. It's not wall-to-wall people. You can talk to folks. You can meet them. It's a better experience for me, I think, as far as getting to meet folks. And I'm sure for the fans it's a better experience because, maybe the big conventions have a guest list that's a mile long. They have a bunch of bands and a bunch of actors, and we brought these directors out. But at a certain point, if you're not getting to see any of them or meet any of them or be any closer than 100 feet away when they're on the stage, I don't know, what's the point? You know what I mean? It's nice, these smaller in the grand scheme of thing events. And again, the fact that I could go to something like that, I say smaller in quotes, I went to Ireland where I have no idea if people like anime, and there's 800 people going to a convention. I mean, that just blows my mind. I think the president of the university said yesterday that the anime manga club had like 400 members. That's huge. That is a lot of people that are into this, again, sort of niche in the grand scheme of things interest. It's flourishing. I mean, it speaks to people. You're getting stories that you don't always get in Western storytelling, in the cartoons and the comics. But I think part of that comes from Japan coming from a more pictorial history. You know what I mean? It's there's never been that divide of like, oh, picture stories, that's for children, that you get in Western culture sometimes. But no, I forget where that even went with that question. I guess in answer to the short version of that, just meeting the folks and getting to hang out with folks that I wouldn't usually get to meet. I mean, it's a thrill for me being such a homebody, and I get to meet folks all over the country, and then in times like this, all over the world. It's amazing. Like, what did I do to deserve that?
Will you be recommending a trip to Ireland to any of your colleagues?
You bet. A friend of mine, Bryce Pappenbrook, and his wife, Samantha, they came over. They weren't at this convention. I think they were in Dublin last year, and they had nothing but nice things to say about the country and the people. And actually, I ended up cribbing a lot of their ideas off of them as far as the stuff to do for the sightseeing, because I thought, well, what worked for you? That worked for you? Was it good? All right, I'm going to do the same thing. Let's not reinvent the wheel. I will tell anybody that I think is worthy of a trip to Ireland. I'm going to look out for you guys. Everybody should go, but they have to be cool enough to deserve Ireland. I hope I deserve Ireland. I love it. It's been nice.
If anyone wants to find out more about you and your work, where can they do so?
Best way, let's see. I have a Facebook page. It's not something that I update as often as I should. It's one of those that I set up where only I can initiate posts because sometimes the other ones just turn into the Wild West. But I have a fan page on Facebook that I think is Patrick Seitz fan page or Patrick Seitz voice actor. It has some sort of appellation at the end to make it distinct from my personal page. And then on Twitter, I am Seitz, SEITZ_unseen, because I like puns. I'm like, Seitz Unseen, and I'm a voice actor. That's cute. I'm on Twitter. I post on Twitter fairly frequently. There's a Patrick Seitz who's just at Patrick Seitz. He's a random tech reporter, not me. So don't just put in my name because it won't be me. Look for the one where like, oh, it's some nerd dude who talks about anime a lot. Read a couple posts. If I'm talking about like Love Live, School Idol Festival, it's me. If I'm talking about, the sale of Dell laptops, it's not me. And then just sometimes people email me. I'm down with that. I get back to nearly everybody. It takes me a while. I'm one of those who will email back and be like, I'm sorry that you wrote to me a month ago. I didn't have time, but very nice to meet you. And here's a voice file of me telling your friend happy birthday is Garage. Because I've done that a couple times, which is fun. I'm out there. I don't have like a crazy big fan club or anything. I don't engender that sort of crazy energy, which is fine. I mean, they're the voice actors where people flap their hands and cry and it's like Beatlemania, but that seems tiring. I'd rather just meet people that are cool and calm and they're like, hey, I like your work. And I'm like, oh, thank you so much, rather than screaming and the crying.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here. I hope you enjoy the rest of Akumakon and your time here in Ireland.
Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of the con, and thank you for letting me babble.